Hello and welcome to Zero Cool Gaming and today's movie review. Today we're going to be reviewing a movie that I watched a long time ago, and it is called A Clockwork Orange. This is an interesting movie because it makes me think. And of course, like all movies that make you think, the reviewers hated it. So let's read a couple of those reviews so that you can get an idea of just what it is that they hate. We'll start with this first one here. A Clockwork Orange review. Kubrick's sensationally Sorbois thesis on violence. Yes, that's what it is, according to this man. This outlandish tale of dystopian delinquency remains deeply thought-provoking, but is not without troublesome elements. Dum dum dum. It's like something you'd pull out of a comic book if comic books were written for adults. Shall we continue? The souring of the swinging 60s got properly under the way with this radioactively outrageous film. Now released as part of the Stanley Kubrick season at London's BFI South Bank, this was Kubrick's sensationally scrobus, I can't even read that word, especially indulgent and mad adaptation of the 1962 Anthony Burgess novel about ultra-violent youth gangs in a dystopian future of Britain. Speaking cod Russian mixed with a weird version of Cockney rhyming slang. Ah, yes. In a place of peace and love and prosperity, A Clockwork Orange offered a new, litigious decade of violence. Yes, anger, misogyny, and degradation of the public space in dreary suburban locales, and modernist design for living that had been vandalized. John Barry's production design showed us rune porn before the phrase had even been invented. Oh yeah, these people hate it. I don't know what all these words are, but this guy obviously spent way too much time in college. Shall we read another? I always love these reviews. I'm actually starting to find them hilarious because these people are absolutely clueless. Continuing on. New review. A Clockwork Orange is an ideological mess, a paranoid right-wing fantasy masquerading as an Orwellian warning. It pretends to oppose the police state and forced mind control. But all it really does is celebrate the nastiness of its hero, Alex. Yes, the incarnation of evil, apparently. And in that, we will continue with my views on the show, because these people have lost their mind. What is A Clockwork Orange? Well, it is an outrageous piece of work. I'll give them that. But it is also a piece of work that makes you think. And what is it that it makes you think about? Well, it thinks about, no, not it. It asks you to think about criminal reform and what that could look like. Do I think that criminal reform as it is today works? Absolutely not, especially when you look at the fact that over 90% of those released for violent crimes repeat the exact same violent crimes that got them there in the first place. I would say that the current iteration of criminal reform is absolutely useless. But this takes a look at a possibility of changing the behavior of criminals and using science to do so. The reason that I don't agree with this use of science isn't because I don't agree with the premise. It's because I know that it's ripe for corruption. We do not live in a utopian society where there are not corrupt people who would use this type of punishment to destroy those they disagree with, to absolutely blackmail, not even blackmail, to falsely accuse those who they disagree with and then use this form of punishment to essentially permanently alter them to where they would never be able to challenge their opinions again. And because we don't live in that utopian society, I don't think that this type of punishment can be used. But if we lived in a better society with, proper oversight and assurances that it wouldn't be corrupted and used to harm those that they opposed or said things they didn't like, I absolutely think that something like this could be done to the most violent of criminals. And let me give you an example of what I mean. If you have a person who murders for the enjoyment of murder, somebody like Ted Bundy, for instance, and this form of mind-altering, what would that be called? Psychological therapy was used, and it would guarantee that he could never perform those acts of violence against anyone again, I would be all for that. Absolutely. And not just in that respect. I mean, you've got countries in this world that do things like chemical castration to, those who would harm children in the most horrible of ways. And if that guarantees that they will never perform those acts again, I'm all for it. The problem is that this type of criminal reform, as I stated, is ripe for corruption. And it would be used against those who had literally done nothing violent, nothing egregious, and were simply lied about, all sorts of things, you name it. All of that would come into play with today's society and today's world. Unless you have like video evidence of them doing whatever it is that they're, being charged with and found guilty of, I don't think that those sorts of things should be used against people at all. And that has more to do with the fact that we find out all the time that innocent people go to prison for crimes they never committed. And there were even witnesses that would say that it was them when they knew darn well it wasn't. That's corruption. And if you have this type of punishment with the advent of corruption on top of it, it will never be used for good. It will never be used for the purpose for which it was created. And that's the problem I have with it. If those things did not exist, and if these things did not happen, then we could, at the very least, discuss such possibilities and maybe come up with a way that we could properly reform the most violent and egregious criminals among us to ensure that they never commit those kinds of crimes again. And A Clockwork Orange presents that argument. Is it the best way of presenting that argument? Probably not. I mean, there's a lot of things in this show that don't need to be there in order to present that argument. But he also needed to make a movie that is enjoyable to some. Did I actually enjoy the show itself? No. There's a lot of things about this show that I found wrong on many levels. But the premise behind it, the idea within it, I found very thought-provoking. And it made me question a lot of things. It made me think in depth about these things. And even though I came to the conclusion that no, this type of stuff cannot be implemented in today's world, it doesn't change the fact that we do have the technology to do this to people. We can chemically alter their bodies and their minds to ensure that they would never be able to perform these types of crimes. We have the ability to do that. You know, but as I stated, and I'll state again, it's ripe for corruption. And there will be innocent people permanently harmed if we did this. And that I just cannot get behind. Okay, well, that's my rant for the day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of yours.